Hello, welcome back to the 616. We're going to be doing a tier ranking video today. And I said I was going to do like a tier ranking video for like all of the Daredevil Born Again Season 2 episodes and all of the Netflix Season 1 episodes because I just finished both of those seasons at the same time. And both were really good, but in like very different ways. So today we're going to do Netflix Season 1, and then in the next video we're going to do Born Again Season 2. I have made like a little tier thing here that I'm very, very proud of. I am probably not going to be looking at this very often as usual because I have like reminders as to what is going on in each episode. I'm really hoping, I think if I put it into presentation mode, it's probably going to erase everything that I've made. So I'm just going to keep it like how it is and I'll crop it. So here we have, let me get rid of my tabs because I have loads of tabs open from when I was getting pictures. So we've got Goated, pretty good, meh, not good, and I don't want to watch it again. So we're going to separate all 13 episodes. It's very difficult to remember like specific details that went into every individual episode, so I'm mostly going to be referencing like big events that I can remember from each one to kind of define each episode. But overall, I've just finished watching the show. So I have a pretty good idea of what happens in each one. And I also have like a pretty decent idea of where each of these is going to go. So we're going to start with episode 1, which is this one here. We've got episode 1, 2, 3. I'm not going to go through and sort them, but they've got like little numbers that you can barely see. But it's fine. It's for me, not for you. So episode 1, in my opinion, one of the best episodes of the entire show, period, out of all 5 seasons that they've now released of Daredevil. I think that episode 1 is absolutely brilliant. It's going in goated. Yes, this is going to be quite a quick video. I also think that episode 2 is one of the best episodes, and I'm putting that in goated. I'll talk about why. I think that episodes 1 through 3 work as kind of similar to like how you get a 5 or 6 issue comic book story. I think that the first 3 issues of the show definitely lean into the idea of like, right, we're setting up this character, this is his origins, these are his motivations. You've got the religion thrown in there, you've got the introduction of Karen, you've got the introduction of Claire, you've got Foggy. Like, all of your core characters are introduced in this portion, right, to establish your protagonist, your lead. And I think that these 2 episodes do a really great job of leaning into like the battling Jack stuff and just who Daredevil is like to his core and like how he's helping people and stuff. I think that episode 3, which introduces Kingpin right at the very end, is also a really, really good episode and kind of is like a nice epilogue to those first 2, in the sense of like, it isn't directly the same story. It's kind of its own self-contained plot of them dealing with their first lawyer case of the show. But during it, Matt has a bit of a crisis because, like, he's aware that they cannot win the case lawfully. The case has been, paid off. The jury's been paid off and stuff. So, or the jury's being blackmailed or whatever. It's not like a fair trial. And that kind of links back into the stuff in episode 1 and 2 of battling Jack and, like, knowing he's got to take the fall and not wanting to, and he does, not wanting to be the fall guy, but having to kind of accept it, that kind of thing. And I think that that's very interesting for Matt's character early on in this season. So, episode 3, I'm going to put in pretty good. I never used to like it until I rewatched it for the channel and realised just how well written of an episode it is. Episode 4, I believe, is the one that the Russians kidnap Claire in, and we have like the taxi depot like showdown sort of thing. This episode's also pretty good. I mostly remember it purely for the Claire stuff, but I think the Claire stuff, they did a really great job with making it feel quite intense. So I'm going to put this also in pretty good. And episode 5. Episode 5 was like the first of a 2-parter, and I think that episode 5 was a little bit weaker than the second half of that two-parter. This was a lot of, like, you know, Claire's injured and, like, we're kind of dabbling in the idea of a romance with Matt, while Matt's also trying to hunt down the Russians, and, you know, Kingpin's just offed one of the Russians. He's like, kind of playing his game of chess, you know. So, and, I mean, they find out, like, at the start of the episode, the Russians are set up with, like, oh, it was the man in the mask that chopped off, like, Vladimir or whatever his name is, his head. And then by the end of the episode, they're like, no, we know it's Kingpin now, we're going to start a war sort of thing. It's a good episode, but I don't think it's very goated. I think it just sits in pretty good. It's a good setup for episode 6, which is goated. I love episode 6. Episode 6 was brilliant to watch. It was really intense. It's the one where Matt and the other Russian get trapped inside the building. They take, like, the cop hostage and stuff. He's talking to Kingpin over the walkie-talkie. It gets a little bit cheesy towards the end, but it's, like, not cheesy enough for me to care too much about. But I like it, and I like the idea of, you know, the Russian challenges Matt's logic of, like, you're okay with, like, me getting shot by somebody else or whatever, you won't do it yourself. You're okay with, like, you beat me up to a certain degree. If somebody else kills me and it's, like, not on you, that it's fine. I can't remember what it was. Shit. I'm definitely, like, misquoting what he was saying. I know what I'm trying to say. I just can't remember what it was in the episode. I've forgotten what it fucking was, and it's going to really annoy me now. But something gets said in this episode that's really good. Let me find out. Holy shit. Okay, I give up. I can't remember what exactly he says in this episode. But I know that he says something, and it, like, challenges Matt's logic, and you're like, oh, it's kind of got a point. Like, he's fine with, like, beating the ever-loving shit out of the Russian guys and the criminals and stuff, but it's just, I think he challenges, like, the no-kill rule kind of aspect of it. And I think that that's fun to do this early on in the season. That kind of concludes the first full arc of the season, though. We've kind of got, like, you know, 3 episodes here that are, like, their own contained arc, and then, like, the introduction to Kingpin and the fiasco with the Russians, and that's, like, its own arc. And then we go into episode 7. 7, 8, and 9 are, like, not their own arc, but they're all sort of individual kind of bottle episodes almost that work really well. So episode 7 was the one where we got, like, the Stick flashback. Stick returned and, like, recruited Matt, and the whole, like, Black Sky thing, and they had the fight in the apartment and stuff. This was an interesting episode. I wasn't really looking forward to this episode when I was doing, like, the rewatch, because when I was younger, I never used to like the flashback episodes. But I can kind of appreciate them now, and I understand the point in them. And I think it helps after reading Man Without Fear, the one by Miller, that, you know, they did a pretty good job adapting this. They kind of put their own spin on it, and kind of they've merged a couple of different versions of the character to create this one, but it's still leaning into Miller a lot. And, you know, Stick's a fun character. He's a piece of shit. He's cool to see. And yeah, I don't think you can really go wrong with this. I thought it was interesting that we got the 1-2 punch of, like, okay, episode 7 is going to be the Matt origin story, and episode 8 is going to be the Wilson origin story, because this one was also really fucking good. This one really gave you a peek into, like, the mindset of the Kingpin. And I think it was around this point that you kind of realized, like, oh, Fisk's getting, like, an entire episode dedicated to him and, like, the way he lives and the effect that Vanessa has on him and his origins. Because, like, by the end of the episode, I'm pretty certain he's mixing up, like, his lifestyle and stuff. You know, he's letting her pick his suits or whatever, and, like, his cufflinks, and, you know, changing him and making him evolve. And I think that that's a really, really interesting way. It sort of, it has, like, a butterfly effect for the rest of the show. it makes sense now, like why she's so important to him, but also tells you like where he gets his rage from and what it was like for him. I think it's a very interesting, like, again, 1-2 sort of punch. And then episode 9 was the one where Mrs. Cardenas was killed. Really, really sad scene. Holy shit, when they're looking at her body in the morgue. And we get the big fight with Nobu. This was a really good episode. It started off a little bit like wonky with the pacing, and I was like, ugh, what's going on? Like, you know, we've just had 2 episodes back to back of like origin stories, and now we're like really slow moving. We needed to pick up the pace, but it did a pretty good job when you got into the ebb and flow of the episode, and then the fight with Nobu was brilliant. It's going into goated. We get the first showdown between Fisk and Kingpin. Kingpin and Daredevil. We get the first showdown between the two. Obviously, Matt survives, makes it back to his apartment, and then is discovered by Foggy. This was a really great episode. Really, really good. Then episode 10 was Nelson v. Murdoch. We got some flashbacks to them at Landman and Zach's. We got like the little Roxxon nod. We got just pretty much an entire episode of them two like going back and forth, and it was really interesting because it reminded me of like when one of the showrunners for like the newer show said that people don't want to watch 2 people having a conversation in a superhero show. And I understand like the mindset of where you're coming from with it, but at the same time you need people to connect to your TV show regardless of what it's about. It can't just be pure non-stop action. So, which I think is why I enjoyed Born Again Season 2 so much, because it felt like a nice mixture of the two. At least in terms of like its pacing and stuff, where like when you had an episode that suddenly didn't have action, you were like, huh, what's going on? But yeah, I thought that this episode, it was really slow, but it was a nice Murdoch and Nelson episode. But it did feel like when you got about halfway through or like 3/4 of the way through, it was like they're making progress with the conversation that Foggy and Matt are having. But then Foggy kind of then reels back and sort of doubles down. And it felt a little bit like, oh, we need him to have like a certain understanding to a degree, but we also need him to remain hostile for the rest of the season so that we can have like some more stakes. So I'm going to put episode 10 in pretty good. I think that it is pretty good, but it's got like, again, it's a very, very slow episode after we've had 7 and 8. We had like a bit of a break with 9, but then, you know, straight back in with like a slow episode. And then unfortunately, despite some of the big events that happen in both 11 and 12, they are going to go, both of them, in meh. And I feel really bad for doing it because both of them are such iconic episodes for the moments that they have. You know, the death of Ben Urich and the death of Wesley. The death of Wesley are such iconic, important moments for the show. But I sort of feel like the rest of the episode for both of those were kind of just slowly building up to that. I will admit that I think that the Mrs. Gao stuff in episode 12 rather, is a little bit better than the stuff in episode 11. I think maybe I'm going to put episode 11 in meh, and I'm going to put episode 12 in pretty good, because I do think, even though it's got some cheesy parkour, at least they tried to do it. The Madame Gao stuff and what that kind of sets up for later on, they were doing some good there. I think it's also in this episode that it's revealed that Madame Gao and Leland were behind like the Vanessa poisoning and stuff. Just overall, I think that happened in episode 10 as well, and kind of like episode 11 we didn't really get much Fisk, and yeah, I feel like episode 11 as an episode is a little bit weaker. And then episode 13, it's goated. I've got my issues with it, but it's goated. It's a really weird episode because it kind of feels like the entire show had this tone for 12 episodes, and then up to the point where like Daredevil in costume confronts Fisk, it kept that tone, and then suddenly dropped it for like a minute. It was like, right, now we've got to do some really cheesy superhero stuff. And don't get me wrong, it is good. I enjoyed the fight between Fisk and Daredevil, but like we start seeing athleticism from Daredevil that we hadn't seen as much earlier in the season. He's doing like careless flips and parkour over stuff that I feel like if maybe we'd seen a little bit earlier on. You know, we saw it kind of with Gal to like justify, okay, he can do it. He's just maybe making the conscious decision not to right now. Maybe until he's got his suit on. I don't know. But it just, some of the shots felt very cheesy. It lent a little bit more into like that early 2000s kind of superhero vibe of like, I'm gonna stand here and look cool. But it was good. It was fun to watch. It was a really satisfying finale for a 13 episode long show. And I think that to a degree, I kind of lean both ways in the sense of this season could have been 10 or 11 episodes. They could have cut out some stuff here if they wanted to and saved it for later seasons. You know, like the Wilson origins, for example. But I feel like you maybe kind of needed that quite a bit. The poisoning of Vanessa, for example. There's sort of like some sub-storylines in there that I think you maybe could have plucked out sort of when appropriate and placed them somewhere else. But at the same time, I think that they also could have made the season longer. I think 13 put them in like a really weird spot. I think that this could have been either like 10 or push it up to 16 and give us a little bit more time. Give us a couple more slower episodes, filler episodes if you want. Because I think that this season does have filler episodes. I mean, episodes 7, 8, and 10... I would consider filler because they're not necessarily important for like the long haul. I don't feel like the characters and the things that they introduce could have been introduced further down the line. And like, for example, the Foggy and Matt stuff, like the conflict that they have there, it's purely so that Foggy can kind of go off and do his own thing for a couple of episodes and then come back with like a bit of a save in episode 13. And I feel like you didn't really need to do that too much. You could have just had him be, you know, a little bit disgruntled for maybe half the episode, but come around by the midway point and then like focus on something else. It could have been picked up and left. You could have also dragged it out longer. I think that there's like a point in the season from around like episode 7 through to episode 11, it's a big chunk of episodes where the pacing feels a little bit off. I think I maybe like need to pluck out episode 9 because the positioning for that episode's really weird. But yeah, I feel like it's not bad by any means, it's just weirdly paced. And I think that overall, maybe it's because it was made to be binged. That's probably the reason why. And watching it like, you know, an episode or two a week is probably not what was intended. But overall, I really enjoyed the season, and I'm pretty excited to see like how Daredevil Born Again Season 2 fares in comparison to it. But yeah, I've really enjoyed it, and when I come round to do my MCU tier ranking, I will be ranking per season, which I don't think I did before. Fairly certain I ranked it just as a whole, the show. But I think I'm going to have to do it per season from now on, because getting into like the specifics of it, there's definitely pros and cons and stuff, and I think that this would probably end up still landing in like GOATed for my entire MCU. But when it comes to like ranking it very specifically next to other stuff, it might move and shake around a little bit. But yeah, I really love the first portion of the show. I think that's the strongest part, and then the finale. Just that wad sort of in the middle to second half. But otherwise, really, really great. Let me know what you thought in the comment section down below. Again, this is all my opinion. This is all subjective. I am by no means any kind of like any like messiah when it comes to TV shows and their pacing and structures and stuff. This is purely just my opinion, and somebody might think that all these ones that I've put in pretty good are like goated. But yeah, that's the wonders of opinions. But yeah, feel free to leave a thumbs up. Go check out the other content on the channel. Thank you for watching, and I will see you guys hopefully in the next video. Bye bye.